This week, in lieu of using Moodle and the screen capturing software that they have embedded there, I'm going to use a tool called Snagit, which is very much like Screencastify, with the exception of having the image of the presenter in the corner. Starting off with our agenda this week, I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about assessment technologies. And the assessment technologies that we looked at, or that we are looking at, are really formal technologies specifically designed for formative and summative assessment, pre-assessments, exit slips. And they are limited in regards to the fact that they have, most of them have a limited type of questions that they ask: short answer, multiple choice, true, false. And that applies to Socrative, Kahoot, Google Forms. And Google Forms has some expanded options as far as math are concerned and ordering and things, but that's a big part of it. And then Plickers. Those are, limited really in that regard. With that said, those limitations still bring a lot of benefits to us in the classroom, especially in the middle and secondary classroom where we have large numbers of students. Just because we looked at those doesn't mean that there aren't other assessment technologies that are more non-traditional types of assessment technologies. And those would be tools like Flipgrid, that you will be learning about, and that was just covered in Kentucky Go Digital, as a matter of fact. It's one that I've been sharing with students for several years, which allows students, it's sort of like Snapchat for education, where students can record short videos to demonstrate their understanding of a particular content. Seesaw would be another app primarily geared towards elementary classrooms that would be used for assessment. Educreation is another app that is a great tool for students to demonstrate their understanding of content knowledge by recording audio, video. They can write on it, and it is just a great tool to differentiate instruction. Poplet can be used, Padlet can be used for, so there are just, and I could go on and on and on. Okay, there are many, many technologies that are not, again, what we think of as sort of traditional assessment tools. With that said, okay, these tools bring many benefits to our classroom, and this all started with, I can remember the first assessment tools. I've been teaching 30 years, and I can remember the first assessment tools that we had, which were called clickers. They were SRSs. They were student response systems. You may have used some in your classroom. You may have used them when you were in college. And there was a lot of research done on those student response systems. And those student response systems were replaced. Why? Or by what? Well, they were replaced by cell phones, right? Or by other mobile devices, but initially by cell phones. If you looked at those old student response systems, or SRSs, what you will see is something that looks like a remote, and then they evolved into something that looked like a smartphone. But as smartphones became more ubiquitous and as more mobile technologies became more ubiquitous, SRSs were phased out, and we very rarely see them anymore. Much of the research done on assessment technologies was done in this initial stage in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, on up until 2013, 14, or so on. Those benefits remain the same. Just because we've replaced them with other mobile technologies has not changed the benefits that we reap from those technologies. So when you see articles that are from that time, just as the same as you would see with interactive whiteboards or other technologies that have just evolved to a degree, mostly in the delivery or in the hardware, the benefits have not changed. And those benefits of assessment technologies are immediate feedback, which is a huge benefit again, especially for middle and secondary teachers who have 150 students. When you don't have to go home and grade 150 quizzes at night, that's a lot of time that you're saving, and that's another benefit, saving times. But that doesn't mean it doesn't benefit the elementary teacher also. Okay, the immediate feedback that's offered by assessment technology, including apps, free them to work with other students one-on-one while the students are getting feedback from the technology. But that immediate feedback that teachers and students receive also benefit them in other ways. One way it benefits teachers is that they can adjust their instruction on the spot. So if you gave a paper and pencil assessment, you would be waiting until, and this is what we're talking about, immediate feedback, you would be waiting until you graded it before you knew where students were in order to adjust your instruction if necessary. With these technologies, you get immediate, as soon as you hit stop with Socrative, it is graded, and you can see how students performed, you can see their level of understanding, and you can adjust instruction if you need to reteach at that point. Likewise, students get immediate feedback, and therefore they understand where they are in regards to their understanding of the content as well. Huge benefit for teachers and for students because of this immediate feedback. As I was alluding to earlier, or as I stated earlier, they also save us time, right? Because we get that immediate feedback. We don't have to go home and grade it, the quizzes. And as I already said, this allows us to adjust our instructions. Now, this can also be a negative, especially for young teachers, in the sense that often it can frustrate teachers because, and it can throw them kind of quote unquote off their game, because when you're a young teacher, I can remember when I was a young teacher, I'd spend all weekend preparing my lessons at the library. This was pre-internet, coming in, ready to teach that content because I had such a thin grasp of the content area in certain areas, that's the only way I knew how to teach it. And so if students didn't know, then that could be be frustrating for the teacher because they don't know how to reteach it. They don't, other than just to teach it the way they did, and that can disrupt the class from the teacher standpoint. Other benefits, as I said earlier, this allows students to have a sense of their current level of understanding. Additional benefits include differentiating instruction, right? So depending on, like with a Kahoot game, what we're doing is we're gamifying that, right? We can embed videos in that, okay? It's fast-paced, it's fun, okay? It has this game-like quality that generates, as we know from the Wang article, energy and excitement that can help ADHD students focus, right? It can appeal to those videos and images that we can include in there, especially since we can include color images that we wouldn't normally be able to in probably a print assessment. Can differentiate our instruction for visual learners, right? And so that's another benefit of these assessment technologies. This increased engagement leads to increased motivation, which also can lead to a decrease in behavior issues, right? If students are engaged, if students are motivated by what they're doing in the classroom, there's less likely to be disruption from students in the classroom, at least the quote-unquote bad type of disruption. It makes me think of the recent death that we had of Representative John Lewis, who talked about getting in good trouble. You have to get in, there's a time and a place that you have to get in good trouble. And there's good noise and disruption in the class when students are excited and having fun and engaged in the activity. And then there's quote unquote bad trouble when they're off task and they're bored and they're disrupting because of that. So this increased engagement and motivation can reduce our problems that we have as far as behavior-wise. Assessment technologies can be used to generate discussions, to create opportunities for authentic learning with data. Okay, you know from Google Forms, you know from Plickers that they create bar graphs. And I didn't even mention Poll Everywhere that has all of these wonderful tools like word cloud and click on images and these threaded discussions. So, but they can be used to generate authentic data for us to talk about and to generate discussion. So in your class, you might ask students what their favorite animal is when you're talking about or different animals from around the world, or different mammals, and you could use a word cloud for that. And as the words get bigger, you can have engage students in a discussion about that. Another big benefit is it gives students who may be reluctant to speak out, or who may be overshadowed by students who dominate the discussion, a chance to have a voice. Everyone can have a voice through the feedback that they provide with these assessment technologies. And it gives them, I know my daughter is reluctant to speak a lot of times for fear of being embarrassed. And so this sense of anonymity that it provides, or this actual anonymity that it provides, can be a benefit of students. Wrapping this up, just to keep the video, I know it's running long, I already mentioned gamification and the benefits of gamification. And then the last, although not the only, or the one that I'm going to mention here, it's not the last, but the one I'm going to mention here, benefit would be that they're green, right? So if you've ever been in a school, you know that copy machine is running from the minute the school building opens to the minute the school building closes. And that's a lot of money that we're spending on toners. It's a lot of money that we're spending on paper. Both of those things are not good for the environment. Also, those are resources, monetary resources that we could be using for something else. And so that's another benefit. So I'm going to stop this video here talking about assessment technologies from last week, and then I'll pick up in the next video going over our agenda.